Who has the most to gain reputation wise? Like who in the NBA, if they win a round or win a title, like who has the most to gain if there was a like best player in the game or best player in the league and they could rise up a bunch of rings in that ranking? So a couple players, honorable mentions. Okay. Rudy Gobert, I think he has a lot to show if he can dominate in a series. If he doesn't get played off a series, he's got.
So let's think about it. So he's got probably the Warriors, even if it's Memphis. Either way, like go to Rudy Gobert. Probably there's no big for him to match up with. If you go to the second round, you've got the Clippers
probably.
So probably wouldn't be until you got to the conference finals where you're either up against a Jokic or an Anthony Davis that really he has a lot to prove. So I could see it. I could see as an honorable mention for him.
But does he matter against the Clippers? That's kind of going to be my question. Does he make a big difference in that series? Joel Embiid, I also think if he wins a title, that's pretty big for his career. He could definitely turn some heads in that scenario. Ben Simmons, I think, on the Sixers as well. That's a guy where you can say, all right, well, this is a guy that stepped up and took the next step into that, I don't know, top 25 players in the NBA instead of just like a really good defensive guy and then a cool, like, fun sidekick that passes and doesn't shoot. Russell Westbrook, I feel like, has already kind of moved his reputation up a little bit, but
see, this is why it's hard to do the like who has the most to gain, because it's clearly Westbrook would be number one. It's just we don't believe he's actually going to win any series. He might not win a game, but if he won a championship, are you kidding? Like he would vault up so many tiers from everybody's perception.
Well, if we're gonna go most to gain, do we go like Luke Cornett or like who's the worst player in the NBA?
Gain a lot.
Luke Cornett, man, in those Celtics like white uniforms, he just looked like a super young Kevin McHale, just like walking around. Devin Booker, I think, also has a lot to gain. If he has a good run, they beat the Lakers, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, he's not just a injury replacement all-star. He's like a.
And you know what? They have some tough guards, man. I mean, it's tough for him because this is his first foray into the playoffs, and the spotlight will be on him. And boy, he doesn't get to ease into his playoff career.
No, the Caruso is going to shut that down, I think.
Caruso.
Kristaps Porzingis, I think, has a lot to gain too. His reputation is way down right now, both health-wise, play-wise, and so coming in, people forget last season he had a 38-point game against the Clippers. Luka went out with an injury in the fourth quarter of Game 3, and Porzingis put up 12 points in the fourth quarter. The Mavericks lost that game, but still, I think he has a lot he can prove in this. Trae Young is another guy I think that can prove a lot.
Man, he's got a lot. Yeah, Trae Young has a lot. A win against the Knicks, which I'm picking it, so it's certainly likely it's on the table. Trae Young definitely elevates his profile, and that Hawks team, just as a team, I think elevates their profile a lot.
Speaking of which, John Collins with a $sign at the end. John Collins is a restricted free agent this summer. He turned down a $90 million deal. He has a lot, like, literally to gain. If he has an incredible series and, does anything to Julius Randle defensively, that could be a big payday for him.
Yeah, a lot to lose, too. I mean, there's maybe a lot there just kind of looking at that matchup. That's a tough matchup for him.
He could go either way, for sure. All right, here's the top 5. Starting with number 5.
Okay.
James Harden. And I put James Harden at 5 and not 1 because, like, how much more can he gain? But also, would a title really move him that much in a direction, right? Like, if you look at him, between him and, I don't know, a guy like Barkley or somebody, does a title really separate him that much if you thought those players were close before? Especially this title with this team. If it was a Rockets team, I think it would be different.
It is interesting. The thing that we forget when we say all of this is that once you get into the games, like how they happen matters. So, I mean, could he be carried to a championship or could he lead the team to a championship? Both are possible. I mean, he's that good of a player. He could be the most valuable of the big three. So I'm with you. Number 5 feels okay. I probably wouldn't put him higher. I don't know how we grade this Brooklyn team, man. They're going to be such a mystery to really analyze.
We've talked about them a lot because of Locked On Mavs. We're like, well, if the 2011 title meant the most of any title in recent memory, right? Then
of course, clearly it does. Clearly.
I mean, clearly. But does this Brooklyn one mean less, right? Like, you know what I mean? Does it, if we put them and rank them on the hierarchy here? Number 4, Chris Paul. I think he could be higher on this, but there's a couple ahead of him, I think. But if he wins a title, I mean, man, that just vaults him into a next
Forget a title. I'm dead serious about this. If they knock out the Lakers, you mentioned Devin Booker earlier. Devin Booker, Chris Paul, all those guys, their profile raises a lot. Like, whoever can take out the Lakers gets a huge sort of like, gets a crown. If it's a team like Phoenix or even Denver or Utah, and what by that I mean a non-prestige team, not the Clippers, not Brooklyn, not one of those. If it's one of those teams, I think it's a huge, in a weird way, it is like a mini championship. It's like a mini little award you get. So Chris Paul, who sort of, I think, both fairly and unfairly has a reputation of being like not great playoff succeeder. If he gets one over LeBron and Anthony.
Yeah, that would be huge. And then the series after that, they would just completely fall because like that was their championship. They come out and look flat the next series. Number 3, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think if he comes out and just goes all the way, if he wins a title, that vaults him into like this rare category, because then all of a sudden is the 3rd MVP on the table for Giannis. He's like start taking it that far. And then you say, all right, well then if he wins 3 MVPs, he's like up there with, who is it, Magic and Jordan, and like there's not many people with 3 MVPs.
He's another one. I mean, if we look at this as not just most to gain, but like sort of most to gain / lose, like they could rise or fall depending on how it goes. He might even be number 1, to be honest, because they've got the Miami Heat and there's some ghosts there. And if they get out in the first round, I think that Giannis just won't be taken seriously. I mean, he had another MVP caliber season this year and really wasn't in consideration for it for one reason: voter fatigue. No other reason. There's no other reason he wasn't a top 3 finalist in this. And if you lose to Miami, or if you lose in the first round, I think you can kiss all of that stuff good. But he could average 50, 10, and 10 next year, and people will be like, yeah, but conversely, if you do go and win this, I do think it even recontextualizes the previous playoff failures as hey, they've solidified their team just a little bit more, and that got him over the hump. So he might even be number 1 to me.
Yeah, there's definitely a case you can be made for him to be number 1 for sure. But number 2 is a guy that we kind of looked at like some of the like the Russell Westbrooks or so. Paul George. I think he has a ton. I think he has a ton to gain in this playoff series. I don't think he has much more to lose, because anytime he steps on the court, like Pandemic P and Playoff P,
he has more to lose. He has more to lose. I'll tell you what, he has his like home to lose, because if they lose in the first or even second round, do you look at Paul George, and especially if it's him, if he plays like he did down the stretch of that Denver series, if he plays like that again, I don't think you stick with him. I think you look for another team to take a flyer on him.
That extension, man. He locked in that extension. He was like, hey, guys, you want to give me that guaranteed money before we go into this? So I think he has a ton to gain for sure. He was one of the reasons why the Mavs were in that series last year. He was just so bad. And then obviously the backboard shot against the Nuggets, and the rest is history. Yeah. Number 1, of course, most lists, I think LeBron James, for just the sole purpose of if he gets 5, then LeBron haters all over the place. And coming from the 7th seed, right? Like you can qualify it however you want. Like 1 blind eye, 3 rims, whatever whatever you want to say.
All right, yeah.
Whatever you want to say. But I do think that it matters that if he gets 5 rings, all of a sudden he gets closer to Jordan. And then all of a sudden it becomes a real argument for some people. And I think that could really elevate him. And that's maybe a small step up that he takes, but that step up is to like GOAT status. You know what I mean?
It's he's on that level, right? I mean, there is something to... 4 is a lot. 5 does tie him with Kobe Bryant, who in recent history is, him and Tim Duncan. And then you're knocking on the door for 6, which has sort of been of the modern era. That's been like the gold standard, the Michael Jordan standard. So as with most things when we do this, LeBron does have the most to sort of gain. But also, let's talk about lose. Mm-hmm. We just threw out the possibility of them losing to the Phoenix Suns. Now, is it a slim possibility? I think so. I think the Lakers probably have this. But if he does, that's a pretty huge failure. If you look at his 3 years at the Lakers, and they have 1 title, very impressive, but 1 missed the playoffs entirely, and another one get bounced in the first round after playing the plan. Like that legacy with the Lakers, I think, takes a pretty major hit. So he has, I agree with you. He's probably number 1 with a lot to gain, a lot to lose.
There you go. Top 5 players that have the most to gain: LeBron James, Paul George, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Paul, and James Harden. There you go. That's us. That's it for Locked On NBA. Go follow Adam Mares and Locked On Nuggets. Go follow me and Locked On Mavs. Got a lot of stuff coming for the playoffs. Thanks so much for listening to Locked On NBA.